Let's talk about something that, back in 2019, it sounded completely bonkers. Remember when the news broke that President Trump wanted to buy Greenland? The entire world basically had a good laugh. But what if it wasn't a joke? What if it was just the most recent and loudest move in a strategic obsession that's been going on for over 100 years?
Yeah, the official reaction was not subtle. The Prime Minister of Denmark, the country Greenland is a part of, flat out called the idea absurd. Late-night TV hosts had an absolute field day with it. The global consensus was pretty clear. This was just a weird, crazy idea from a president who used to be a real estate mogul. Nothing to see here.
But here's the thing. While all the memes and punchlines were flying around, a lot of people in the US defense world were probably just nodding along. You see, this wasn't some new, out-of-the-blue idea. Trump wasn't the first American president to try and get his hands on Greenland. Nope, he was actually the third.
When you actually look back at the history, you see this really clear pattern. This isn't just a random impulse buy. It's a recurring American goal. It all starts way back in the 1860s with William Seward. Yep, the same guy who bought Alaska from Russia. Fast forward to 1917, and the U.S. actually buys Danish territory, what we now call the U.S. Virgin Islands. Then, in 1946, President Truman goes all in, making a formal offer of $100 million in solid gold for Greenland. So yeah, there's a serious precedent here.
So, why? What is this century-long obsession all about? It's not about just making the map bigger. It's about military strategy. It's about geography. And it's about a concept that turns Greenland into one of the most important pieces of real estate on the entire planet. To really get why Greenland is so vital, you have to understand something called the GIUK Gap. That stands for Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. Think of it like a giant gate. If you're a Russian nuclear submarine hiding in your Arctic bases and you want to get out into the open Atlantic to threaten shipping lanes or the U.S. East Coast, you have to pass through this gate.
For NATO, this whole area is basically a giant monitored tripwire. It's packed with underwater microphones, constantly watched by patrol planes, and scanned by satellites. And Greenland forms the massive western wall of that gate. If you control Greenland, you basically control the front door to the North Atlantic. It makes it incredibly hard for an adversary to sneak their submarines out without you knowing.
And that leads to this really powerful idea. Military planners call Greenland the unsinkable aircraft carrier. And it makes perfect sense, right? You can sink a ship, you can take out an airbase, but you can't sink a 2 million square kilometer island. It gives you a permanent, forward-deployed platform for radar, for jets, for missile warning systems, sitting right on top of the world. In a real conflict, that kind of positioning saves precious minutes of reaction time. And again, this isn't just some theory. The US is already there, big time. Pittafik Space Base in Greenland is America's northernmost military base. It has these massive radar arrays that are constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of a ballistic missile launch coming over the North Pole. It is an absolutely 100% critical piece of North American defense. It is irreplaceable. Okay, so you've got the whole military angle. That's been the story for 100 years. But there's a new chapter being written right now. Because as Greenland's massive ice sheet starts to melt, it's revealing what could be a literal trillion-dollar treasure chest of resources. And trust me, the world's biggest powers have noticed. Think about the device you're watching this on right now. Your phone, your computer, the electric car in your garage, the guidance system in a modern missile, they all need a special group of minerals called rare earth elements. And here's the problem for the West. China has a near monopoly on processing them. We're talking 85, maybe 90% of global capacity. That gives Beijing a terrifying amount of leverage over pretty much all modern technology. And this is where Greenland becomes a potential game changer. It's sitting on one of the biggest undeveloped rare earth deposits in the entire world. For the US and Europe, this is one of the only clear paths to breaking that supply chain dependency on China. But, and this is a huge but, a Chinese-backed company is already a major player in the project to develop that very mine. So the race is already on.
So, how much is all this actually worth? You combine the strategic military value with the mineral wealth hidden under the ice, and what do you get? Well, some analysts have tried to put a number on it, and the estimates they came up with were staggering, pushing into the trillion-dollar range. Think about that. For the cost of a company like Apple or Google, you could secure a massive strategic advantage for a century. But here's the reality check. You can't just slap a price tag on a country, on its people, on their home. The geopolitical game being played today is a lot more subtle than that. And it all revolves around Greenland's own complicated, passionate dream of becoming an independent nation. And this gets us to the heart of what's often called the independence trap. If you poll Greenlanders, a huge majority, somewhere between 60 and 80%, say they want full independence from Denmark. The desire is real and powerful. But the economic reality is brutal. Over half of Greenland's entire public budget, the money for hospitals, schools, everything, comes from a big $600 million annual check from Denmark. They want freedom, but right now they literally can't afford it.
So this is where the modern strategy kicks in. It's not about buying land anymore. It's about buying influence. The new playbook is this: wait for Greenland to vote for independence. When they do, that money from Denmark vanishes overnight. That new, independent Greenland will be desperate for a partner to fill that massive hole in their budget. And whoever steps in, with investment, with security guarantees, with cash, becomes the new, indispensable power behind the throne.
But we absolutely cannot forget that this giant geopolitical chess game is being played on top of someone's home. The people of Greenland, the Inuit, are dealing with deep historical trauma, like the horrifying Little Danes experiment where kids were taken from their families. The country has one of the highest suicide rates on Earth, and their traditional way of life, based on hunting on the sea ice, is literally melting away. This isn't just an empty piece of ice, it's a nation of people who are incredibly resilient, but also incredibly vulnerable.
And it's that vulnerability, that mix of hope and desperation, that sets a really dangerous stage for the future. The source material we've been digging into actually lays out a speculative but chillingly plausible scenario for how this could escalate. Let's say in January of 2026, where this quiet power struggle suddenly burst out into the open.
In this scenario, the language coming out of Washington has changed a lot. A White House press secretary is quoted saying that using the military is just one of several tools on the table. Think about that. That's the kind of language you use for a hostile state, not a territory belonging to a close NATO ally. It's a shocking escalation.
And the backlash, of course, is immediate. Allies in Europe are absolutely horrified. They warn that even just suggesting the use of force against a friendly nation threatens the entire international system that's been in place since the end of World War II.
So let's be super clear about what this scenario means. It's not about an invasion, it's about the tone. The conversation has officially shifted from being a quirky real estate deal that everyone laughed at to being a dead serious, publicly stated national security priority for the United States. The diplomatic gloves are well and truly off.
When you boil it all down, you're left with this four-way tug-of-war. For the United States, Greenland is a shield, a defensive wall. For China, it's a battery, the power source for the next generation of technology. For Denmark, it's a complicated historical responsibility. And for the 57,000 Greenlanders who live there, it's just home.
And that leaves us right here, with this one massive question hanging over the top of the world. The ice is melting, the old maps are becoming obsolete, and the world's next great prize is being revealed. The question isn't if this frozen island will become a global hotspot, but who will win the race to control its future? Who is going to hold the key?